Hello, welcome my spooky bitches. We're gonna get ready today and I'm gonna talk about my job. That's what we're gonna do. Now, this was requested as far as a makeup routine, so we're gonna cover it. First, you want to moisturize the shit out of your overly dry face, like me. Now, I work for a fairly decent sized casino. I used to work for a much smaller one where I had far more authority. I was an operations supervisor with no other management above me for a like 240 machine casino. Currently, I'm working at one that has over 3,000 machines, and I'm working within a department. I'm a department supervisor within electronic gaming, is what I'm currently doing, which is the same position. I'm still MOD at times. It's just not where I'm permanently that status. It happens to just be when there is not an operations manager there. That is what I do. I started in like from the bottom rung. I was what's called soft count, where the people who go around and pull the cans out of the machines and they do that first initial count. That is where I started. I've been there for about 8 years. It's all within the same company. So even though I'm at a different place that's much bigger, it's still the same people I work for. All right. Now that we've moisturized, let's exfoliate the lips. Get the palette ready. All right. And what I moisturized with was just some face moisturizer by St. Ives. And this is just Wet n Wild lip scrub. Gets rid of all the dead skin. I'll just wipe some of that off. All right. Now, this was initially requested with, like, what was your wildest experience? And I would save that one for the end. So we're going to go over the other questions. Starting with how many drunk people come into the casino. And I'm just going to say a lot. If they're not already drunk, they are getting there while they're there. We do have 2 bars actually within facility. And I believe the state of Oklahoma stops at 2. I actually think we're earlier than that. I think we're 1. There are time frames where we actually cut off at midnight, depending upon coverage. Everything with COVID has led to some like insane time frames for that. We are a 24-hour facility. I work 3rd shift, so I'm there all night dealing with that stuff. Okay, so now normally I don't really use foundation, especially like going to work. Where did I put my stuff? Where did I put everything I'm using? But today we're gonna go full coverage. Figure we'll have some good times with this. So for foundation, it is Maybelline Fit Me. It was cheap. It was on sale. Actually, before we do that, I should probably put some primer on. Just a little bit. I don't really have an issue with oily skin. My skin's actually usually very dry. As I've stated, dry and red, like a desert. So yes, lots and lots of drunk people, lots and lots of drunk people causing problems. Some are completely fine. There is no outside alcohol allowed. It does not mean they don't bring it in, and it does not mean they don't go drink it from their trunks and then come in. We're aware. If we catch you, we will ask you to leave. Alright. So, again, just dab some of this on. See how this works out, because again, I don't normally do full coverage. Alright, and the same question. Kind of, not the same question, the same person asked it. Was, do you, like, how often do you get scammers in there? Here's the thing. Every day, every day there's somebody who's coming in a scammer capacity. We have multiple different things that go on for scamming. Specifically, if you're talking about like table games, which we do have, we don't get a lot of like card counters. We don't get a lot of like Ocean's 11 scammers. What we get is we get counterfeit bills, which, may I recommend, don't ever bring that to a casino. Let me tell you, we're used to seeing money. It's a big thing we deal with. We know what fake ones look like. We do occasionally get ones that say 4 movie productions on them. That's always funny. Most people are like, oh my God, I didn't notice. I have had people that argue that, like, why does that not count? It's like, because it's not money, sir. It doesn't count because it's not U.S. currency. It's movie currency. Blending the... Okay, so also for scammers, the big thing beyond that type of stuff is counterfeit checks. We do check cashing as far as payroll. A lot of times it's personal check withdrawals, which are just essentially a withdrawal. It's just they'll use your check to kind of get the banking information on it, off of it. This happens all the time. We actually catch it pretty quickly because there's a lot of things that we're looking for. We're pretty well trained in how to spot fakes when it comes to checks. Occasionally, and this has happened, we're able to delay the person long enough so that we can get the police there, because they're always, it's always a ring of people. It's never a one-time shot that somebody's in there trying to forge a check. It's people do this. They go to different casinos, they go to different places. We have caught people, and when they like check their vehicles, had a check printing machine in the car. What they do is they get people's account numbers and they put them on the check, and they're able to pull it out if it's a valid thing. Now, a lot of times the big thing is that because they don't know what banks those check numbers are off of, the banking information on the check is incorrect. That's a big way we catch them. That's always fun. Smart ones usually run really quick as soon as we start looking at stuff. But we always get IDs anyways with stuff, so we know who you are. Like, you might have gotten away with it, but we're gonna catch you eventually. All right. Now let's move on to Simple Blush. Let me check my questions. I wrote everything down. There's only a few of them, but I wrote them down just in case. Okay. Is it like the movies? Yes and no. For a customer, yes, it's very much, we're an entertainment industry. It is set up to entertain you. Our particular casino is more frequented by locals. It's definitely darkly lit. It has a very shady vibe, but you feel very safe because we have tons of security officers walking around. But at the same time, you kind of have that like slightly gritty Vegas feel. Whereas like our sister casino, that's the same size, has far more of a touristy vibe, way better lit. Definitely has more of this like entertainment setup. Like they have like a circular bar in the middle, whereas ours are just kind of in corners. The two that we were just kind of tucked away. Okay, I know I apply blush a little weird because I still apply with my smudgy sponge. But for employees, it's not like movies. It's like working in any place. Probably the big thing is just how well lit everything in the back is. Because it would, you know, be a safety hazard if we couldn't see. I think that looks all right. Try pull my mirror closer. Pull that a bit better. As far as like the areas that are in the back that you see in movies and they look like these giant banking vaults. No, we don't have a giant banking vault. All the money's insured. So realistically, if anybody did manage to break in and steal anything, we would get it all back regardless. With that too, that is actually the top question I'm asked is how to steal the money. And it's not worth it. Like, my biggest pet peeve when it comes to the movies and money is how much money weighs and what the size of it is in comparison to what they're telling you. Me and this girl sat down one day and did like the math on what could fit in a briefcase. And it was like, I think if you had it in hundreds, and like the larger size briefcases, it was like 1.2 million, but like attaché cases or in like 20s, it was like 500,000. You're not seeing $10 million in a suitcase. It's not going to fit. On top of which, like the weight of it to carry $10 million in like 20s, for example, would be insane. You would need so many people that you'd have to cut that money with. And is that worth it in the long run? You're not going to get enough to survive your whole life. You're going to have to keep stealing stuff. So that's always like the question that people tend to ask me is how to steal the money. Also, like my job would want me to answer that if I did know how. And our security guards are armed, FYI. So they are very good at de-escalation and they do not ever attempt to use any of the weapons they carry. They do have non-lethal weapons, but a lot of them also have actual firearms. So don't come to a casino to cause problems, is all I'm saying. They don't want to hurt you, but they will for the safety of the people there. All right, what is next? Let's see. What color shall we go with today? Pull out some palettes. All right. Let's do a little face powder to set this. Now, I've been over every department except for pretty much security, who I've worked very closely with, and with table games itself. However, this next question, which is about table games, I'll cover in a much more broader sense, and that is, how well do you pay your dealers? And the thing is that dealers make very, very good money. Which is not, that's a short answer, but the long answer is they have a base pay amount, which I actually don't know what the actual base amount is. I can tell you that for the company as a whole, whether you are in housekeeping, a dealer, management, doesn't matter, everybody starts out at $12 or above. So the lowest paid department starts out at $12. And I can tell you that housekeeping specifically, they get bumps based upon like certain classes they take. So when they take like hazmat classes for dealing with like blood, like bloodborne pathogens, stuff like that, I know that they get like increases in that regard too. So housekeeping makes good money as well. Now, there are a lot of departments, and the dealers are one of them. Electronic gaming, which are the people who are essentially paying out your jackpots, fixing machines, the one that I'm currently in, are tipped positions for their frontline staff. I'm not in a tip position. I'm in a management position. So when you tip on a jackpot, when you tip, your dealer, it goes into, for us, a tip pool. And for the tip pool, and that was just Wet n Wild Focus setting powder, translucent setting powder. It goes into the tip pool. Everything's everywhere. And then it's broken down. So how much ever is taken in within a 24-hour period, it gets broken down to an hourly amount that each person gets paid based upon the hours they work. So, if there's 100 hours worked and $100 taken in, you get an additional $1 an hour. It's way more than that. The most I've seen for the dealers in one night on a tipped, because I did used to have to count them, was $15,000 was what they took in. It was a tournament that was going on, and I can tell you that there were no more than 12 max dealers working that day. I don't know if it was less than that, but I can tell you it wasn't more than that. So you can make some pretty good money. My frontline staff makes more than I do because they are in a tipped position. One of the things though is that I'm full time, and that comes with, and this is just the Ulta. It's an Ulta Beauty palette. I'm just using the lighter sort of flesh color to sort of prime the eye, so the color popped a little bit better. In management, comes with certain benefits by being full time. One of them is we get health insurance, and the company pays a premium. So I don't pay for my health insurance. That includes like all your dental. It includes $1,500 worth of dental, and anything preventative is free, and that doesn't go towards that $1,500. So I've had some dental stuff done where like they paid $1,500 towards it, and it's like 90%. Like whatever it is, like it was like 90% up to $1,500, and then everything preventative free. I think is exactly what that says. Don't quote me. Now, if you have a family and you want to put your family on it, I can tell you that for a full family, it's $100 a month. For like you and a spouse, it's like $80. So not the best deal if it's just you and a spouse. Which I have all these talking points because I do have some full-time staff, but much because of the tip position, it's not many. I think it's like a 80-20 split, like 80 part-time, 20 full-time. Okay, let's see. What are my next questions here? All right, this next one. Now, I work for, and I'm going to say this, an Indian nation, and I'm saying this because that is how they refer to themselves, and that is what's in all of my back-end stuff. It's called Indian gaming. You can Native American, tribal, First Nations, however you want to put it. The way that it works for us is that's what's on all of our paperwork. And the question I got asked is, how does that work? It has a very interesting history. I'm not originally from Oklahoma, where I'm at, so I'm not from a place that has a lot of, Indian gaming. So I took a lot of these history classes they offered that talked a lot about the history of not only this particular nation, but like the 5 civilized tribes and just a general like American history on it. And some of them talked about like how the gaming started. And essentially it started that it was illegal to gamble on reservations at all. But they were allowed bingo. So they would have these like bingo halls, bingo parlors. And this is where you get class 2, class 3 gaming. And I'll explain that. And the palette that I'm mostly using today is Jeffree Star, which I know is super controversial. But I'm also not going to waste it because I own it. And I'm going to use it all up and then not buy any more in the future. Because shady things. But just in general, I don't waste. Doesn't take any money away from it. So class 2 gaming, when you go and you see a machine that has a bingo pattern on it, usually in like this little tiny box that is on the machine, or it could be on the visual part of the machine itself. This is class 2 gaming. You're actually betting off of a bingo pattern. So most of these will say that gameplay is for like entertainment purposes only. It doesn't indicate wins. Well, while that's true, they really do correlate, like purposely, because why else would you be playing it? And then there is class 3 gaming. And class 3 gaming is your Vegas style machines. These machines have what's called a pseudo-random number generating chip inside. It can't be completely random because all machines will pay a certain percentage out over their life. Sometimes you can see this if you go and read like all the back end parts of the machine, and sometimes it's not in a part where customers can access. But they all have a percentage. Some states have actual requirements. I know Connecticut does. I think they have to average 90 or 92% on the dollar, which means they have to pay back 92 cents for every dollar they take in. Oklahoma does not have a set amount. I can tell you this, though. They usually do not manufacture machines below 85%. And the majority of our machines sit at that 92% amount, because anything below that, nobody wants to play. They're not winning enough. It's not keeping them entertained. And what that means when it comes to class 2, class 3 gaming is that if it's not busy, if there's not a lot of people in there playing, if it's that time of night where there's not a lot going on, I don't recommend playing the class 2 gaming because there's not as much money being put into that pot. And the shades I'm using today are Pricked and Cherry Soda for right now. As I mess up already. And that doesn't mean that they can't win. It just means that you're not going to see as much. The bingo ones are linked in to each other. Sometimes it's by vendor, sometimes it's by bank. It's different. Nobody could tell you that which they're connected to unless they were the vendor themselves. And even then, a lot of times they can't tell you, especially judging from some of the setups of these, were not what the paperwork said it was supposed to be. Like, it wasn't terribly off. It was just this wasn't connected the way this was, and this was more standalone type of deal. Like, not something that would affect it too much other than like the progressive payouts for those amounts that add up as you keep playing. There we go. Now, the other thing about working for Indian gaming is that we're not on a reservation or anything. Oklahoma does not have any reservations. It is tribally owned property. Tribally owned property, we'll go with that. If you see a big cut before this, it's because I said the name of who I work for when I shouldn't have. And what that means is that we go by federal rules. It's a sovereign nation. So everything we do is federally regulated. So you cannot bring in medical marijuana. These are like federal things. You can't bring in firearms. That might be an individual policy, but I'm pretty sure it's probably federal too, that you're not supposed to bring it to federal places. Now, it doesn't mean that those things don't happen. And if it's not a malicious thing, if it's not something where you're doing it when we've told you not to, a lot of times we just ask you to leave or take it out, remove it from property, especially when it comes to firearms, because it's Oklahoma. I figure now that I'm in the middle, I'll do my eyebrows because I forgot about it. I'll go back to that Ulta palette and use some brown just to darken it up a bit. Where's my brushes? Yes, now we definitely do have people who bring firearms in. And for the most part, again, if we can tell that you're just somebody who's used to, because it is a open carry state, and you just happen to have it on your hip, we will very politely be like, pardon me, we're going to need you to take that off property. However, we do get people who come in knowing full well they aren't supposed to have firearms, but bringing firearms anyways, because we get people who try to sell drugs, we get prostitution, all the crimes that come with people having firearms. Now, these firearms are not intended to be used towards staff. They're intended to be used for protecting their drugs, prostitutes, that sort of thing. Doesn't make it better. Still a danger. We have codes for this sort of thing. They get called over the radio. The big instances we've had with firearms, we did have someone who happened to have like a little Derringer in their pocket, and it fell out, hit the ground, went off, and shot the roof. That was kind of funny because it wasn't intentionally, again, at anybody, but it did put everybody in danger. All right, now I'm going to use this dark red color. Mostly, we find guns when people ditch them. A lot of times because of police presence. There is tribal police. So FYI, if you get arrested in a casino, you're going to wherever the tribal police are. For us, that's like an hour drive away. We do work with local police if it's a small thing, but a lot of times if they're arresting you, it's not a small thing. It's a lot of paperwork that nobody wants to fill out. Let's just go down my hands. Here we go. Now we get somewhere. But because it is federal rules, we do get a lot of people questioning that because state rules will be different. Ow. Try not to swear like a crazy person. All right. Beyond that, I mean, it's probably the best place I've ever worked for, as far as like their policy is that all boats rise with the tide. So the setting of like what their minimum is, they reassess that. That is actually probably the third time they've adjusted what the minimum was since I've started for them. So it is something that they do take a look at, and they do assess and make sure that people are being paid fair wages. When we were closed down for, I think it was like 3 months during the middle of COVID, they not only paid us, but the tipped positions, they paid the tips. Like whatever you averaged for like the 6 weeks prior, they paid that average like to you with your paycheck, to make sure people could afford to live. So very much employee orientated, but comes with some high expectations as far as like doing what you're supposed to be doing, which does confuse some of my employees sometimes, especially if you're young and you haven't worked terrible jobs before. I understand it when they're just like, why do I gotta do this? And it's like, you shouldn't even be questioning this. All right, now time for the eyeliner. Now, for anybody who doesn't use eyeliner, there are several different types of eyeliners, from like pencils to liquid eyeliners to just like liquid eyeliner pens. They all do different things. They're all difficult in their own way. This was also asked to kind of explain eyeliner because it can be difficult, and it really, really can. I'm going to use black, but pro tip here, if you take like some Visine eye drops and mix a little bit of any color in a palette with that, instant eyeliner in like whatever color you're looking for, because they don't make a ton of different eyeliner colors. And when they do, like, who wants to buy all of those? Like, you can buy a palette, then you have the eyeshadow too. All right, now let's get on to the final question, which was the craziest time I've ever had. Now, there's tons of crazy things that happen in a casino in general. Also, tip for eyeliner, keep your eye open. Also, pull back a lot so that if you blink, you're not gonna smudge that. I'm just making small strokes because it's easy for me. Some people can whoop and they're done. I gotta do small strokes. Now, this probably wasn't the craziest thing, but to me, it was the most impactful. And it was when I was at the smaller one. I know this is going to come up again, working for a much larger facility. I know it's going to come up worse, but we did have somebody who almost died. We have had people who have passed away, but it was never anything I've had to deal with. This was the first time that I had to deal with that happening. And what it was we had somebody who went into the men's room and decided to do some drugs. FYI, pro tip for a casino, don't do drugs where there's no cameras, which is the bathrooms, because we don't know that you're dying in there. And one of my employees came to me to tell me that somebody was unconscious in the men's room. So I grabbed security, 2 security officers, who were both female as well, because it happened to be what we had there that night, were just female security officers. We go in there. This guy is in the stall, passed out against the door. So we start banging on it, trying to get some response, any response at all, as far as to just see if he was conscious and hopefully get him to open the door. No response. Now, there was a decent sized clearing from the bottom of the stall to the floor. America and their gaps in their bathrooms saved this man's life. So I was able to go grab this pole that we had in the housekeeping closet for reasons, and half slide under there and hit the lock of the door so that we could get it open. Now the stall is also very narrow. Not a great fit anyways. And we have an unconscious guy probably on drugs. As soon as we get it open, we could tell there was paraphernalia in there. Yes, he was definitely on drugs, which makes him a danger. So the security officer goes in there, wedges herself in there, and manages to get this guy flat on his back, which was not only impressive, but dangerous to her, because if he had woken up and somebody's in close proximity to him while he's on drugs, who knows what he's going to do. But she gets him flat on his back with his legs sticking out of the stall. I grab his legs and I pull him out from under the stall. And he is turning purple. Now, I don't know how many people have ever seen somebody not breathing and dying before. Like, essentially, they don't have the oxygen, but they turn this reddish, purplish color before it starts turning gray, which was really weird and scary. So we start doing chest compressions. They start doing chest rubs, then compressions. When he doesn't respond to that, they get him to take a breath. And we've already, at this point, contacted EMS. That was done over the radio, which we had with us. So she's doing chest compressions. And we're getting him to breathe, and it's about 3 times that he dead stops breathing and starts to turn this like purple gray color before local law enforcement arrives. It was not tribal police, it was local law enforcement. These guys show up, and I don't know if they were brand new, but one guy just looked terrified that we were dealing with this. Right before they arrived, actually, we did pull he had like a knife on his belt, and we moved anything that could have been used as a weapon away. That was just a safety precaution for us. But when they arrived, he was essentially unresponsive at that point. They administered Narcan or Narcan, however it's pronounced, to reverse essentially the drugs. He didn't respond right away, so I can't tell you. We're all pretty sure that whatever it was something like fentanyl or heroin or something like that. It did start working once the tribal police arrived and the ambulance team arrived. He was starting to be like conscious, and his color had returned to a person color. And it was just terrifying because I almost watched a man die. Like, that would have been very traumatizing to have seen somebody die. On top of it, it struck me that, like when it comes to somebody drowning, it was very quiet. It was terrifyingly silent. Just our efforts to revive him was all that was happening. That was the entire sound, was just us attempting to get him to respond. Versus, like, you know, you expect there to be yelling and people like demanding stuff. And even we had like 10 people in this bathroom, because we had several law enforcement agencies, including an ambulance team, it was still really quiet. People were just doing what they needed to do. which is good, but still terrifying. All right, put a little bit lighter color, kind of ombre this out. Just a little. And comparisonly, like, I had a lot of employee issues I was dealing with that night. And it puts this perspective of just how small some issues can be. I get it. Everybody's issues are definitely important to them. But when you're sitting there watching somebody almost die, like, the fact that somebody was, like, being mean to you, that you are also just assuming they were being mean to you, is very small potatoes. Where did that other one go? But that was like the craziest thing. The other thing that happened, and this was more of an internal thing, was the time that they were building a structure and they hit the gas line. Now, luckily, nothing happened when they hit the gas line, other than it started leaking gas. So I can't tell you how badly they hit it. I was in the count room at the time all this was going on. I was still, like, essentially frontline. Like frontline staff, where I was essentially one of the people who counted the money. And that's what we were doing at the time, is we were counting the money. And a security officer shows up. And he's like, we're evacuating. But we have very specific rules where you can't leave the money out. So we had never been told otherwise. This has not been anything that had ever come up. So we're like, no, we can't evacuate. Like, you don't know our rules. And then we noticed that the team who was supposed to take our money had evacuated. So we're like, well, there's really nothing to do at this point. Kind of made an executive decision, me and this other person, to just sort of cover everything and walk out. Which our manager later talked to us and was like, what's wrong with you? Just safety is important. Evacuate. We're like, it wasn't in the rules. She's like, I don't care. Be safe. But we evacuate to the spot that we're supposed to be, because they're, like, with anything, fire drill, there's a safety spot. Document everybody who's there, make sure everybody's evacuated, make sure everybody's safe. And we're standing there, having evacuated for, again, a gas leak. A gas leak. This girl decides this is the perfect time to light up a cigarette and have a smoke while standing outside. Now, we were far enough away. It wasn't like there's any gas right near us, but still, it was a gas leak. The manager, who again had been like, your safety first, I thought she was gonna blow her top at this girl. Because one, she shouldn't have actually had any cigarettes on her. Her uniform was a particular department that didn't have pockets, because we're in count rooms. Like, she was in the vault, not the actual count room, but a vault. So she shouldn't have had the cigarettes on her. They were stuffed in her bra, apparently. But just lit up a cigarette. Turns out everything was fine. They had the fire department come, check everything out, turned off the line, got it taken care of, got it all sorted out. And we were able to go back in and finish our count. Now, other questions people have asked me. How much money have I seen at one time? As far as, not as like a whole, but like as like a pile of cash type of deal. $5 million. Again, why I have that pet peeve for how much this stuff weighs and what the size of it is, because I've seen what this looks like. It's not easily carried. Kind of shade this a little bit better. Blend it out. We have had scandalous things happen, but that's any place. Nothing people did on the clock type of deal, but people who were later arrested, and now we deny ever work for us type of deal. There were several of those. And they were very, very scandalous things that happened. Which is why I'm not going to say anything. Where'd the settings go? I just had this. Well, I guess we're not setting it. But yeah, so some scandalous things have happened. But the guy almost dying was probably the most emotionally impactful to me. Normally when we deal with people who are deceased, it's older folks who came into play and passed out, and we find out because, you know, we got to wake them up because if you can't be sleeping. We do call EMS, we do call people to revive them, we do make attempts to revive them, but it's usually elderly folks who they're not going to be revived. And this is the other thing that does happen, and this is one of those things where I caution people when it comes to like responsible gaming. We're trained on watching these signs. We can't address it with you unless you're opening that conversation, but we have all the resources available. So definitely talk to somebody if you're having an issue. We do have people who specifically come to like our parking lot to unalive themselves, essentially. All you're doing is traumatizing the folks who find you. Like, it changes nothing in company policy. Usually, that's security. We do parking lot patrols. For other stuff, just anything that might be illegal, stuff in vehicles, are usually the bigger things that we're looking for. People do come up and they leave pets or children in their vehicles they would leave them in there for hours if we didn't come and talk to them and make them take their children home. That happens far too frequently. I'm not the nicest when dealing with that because that is just such a trash thing. To leave a child of varying ages, and it's always varying ages. Usually if it's a baby, they bring them in with them and we have to tell them to leave. But we have seen some fairly young children who, 7 or 8, left in a car. One, it's a casino. Do you know the kind of clientele that are sitting out there in that parking lot? You don't. We don't. We have security, but that doesn't mean that there may not be. There have been situations where people have stolen vehicles with children in them. The intention wasn't the child, but you don't know what these people are going to do. And sometimes just older children, and I always feel bad for them because clearly, like, they're used to this. They look used to it. Don't leave your kids in the car. But I think this is mostly done. I have a lot more to talk about. If I did, maybe I'd do a whole completely different one. Just very Vegas style makeup look. I do actually wear intense eye makeups to work because it is a casino. We have to have normal color hair, but they didn't say anything about normal color eye makeup. So I go a little wild on that. Anyways, thanks for joining me, spooky bitches. This is Inky Horror, Nikki Twopence, signing off. See you later.